All right. G'day, everybody, and welcome to this show in which we are going to talk about Christians and the horror genre. For those who aren't familiar, my sister Emma and I have been writing short horror stories for the last year and have been releasing them on a podcast called Sibling Horror. And so I thought I would invite my sister on today and we would talk about the horror genre in general, maybe some objections to it, maybe how we got started writing it, and then we'd like to kind of go over our 11 or 12 stories, is it now? We have one about to release and just sort of kind of give you guys the scoop on what it was like writing them and our favorite stories and all that sort of stuff. So, Emma, Fradd, g'day.
G'day! Does everyone else hear that music? Or?
Oh my gosh, I know what you mean. I walk around singing it all the time after listening to it for about 5 seconds. How's it going? It's morning where you are.
Yes, it's 7:05. My roommate is asleep in the next room. I hope that she doesn't get bothered by my loud voice.
Be awesome if she came in and just started chewing you out. Really friggin' respectful, Emma. Way to be a roommate. Oh, you're recording. Sorry. Yeah. Thanks so much for waking up early. It's doing well. Yeah, it's 5 p.m. my time. So after this, I am going to go home and literally process a deer that my son shot with a crossbow. That's what I'm doing. I actually was yanking out like quarters of deer today and laying them on the garage to kind of let them thaw out. So that was fun.
Wow. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. We should write a story about that.
Yes. A big hello to everybody who is watching this live. Feel free to tell us where you're from and tell us your favorite horror story. Do us a favor, click that like button and feel free to share this online because it really helps us. All right, Emma, maybe here's what we could do. We could kind of begin by just talking about our thoughts about about the horror genre in general. Maybe some of the horror stories we enjoyed or didn't enjoy watching when we were young, and then talk a little bit about how we got started with Sibling Horror. So tell us why, your general thoughts on horror and why you're into it.
Look, I feel like I always liked horror as a young one. I don't know if it's because you and Tom were boys, so you were into boy things. But I remember watching like Child's Play with our cousin Melissa when I was younger. And I was like, kill a doll, that's cool. And I think like I know some people who just can't do horror, and I think that's just because they were never brought up with it. But I think because I was brought up with it, I'm able to process it. And I don't know, I really like it. I actually asked myself this question a lot this year. Why do I like it? Is it weird that I like it? Is it a good thing? And I think I realized that I just really love story. Mm-hmm. And I think horror can be a really great analogy for pain and hurt. And yeah. What about you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, unfortunately, I was raised on a lot of horror at a very young age. So when I was like 12 years old, I was going around to a friend's house and this person's parent would buy us things like, Nightmare on Elm Street and Jason and Halloween and Child's Play, you name it. And I think a lot of those movies are rubbish. I heard somebody say, and I agree with them, that there may be no other genre that is so filled with trash. And so I get a Christian and just a normal person's immediate reaction to the idea of horror. Like, this is ridiculous. It's just mindless crap. To which I would say Hallmark movies are too, and maybe more so. But anyway, but what the things I used to really like were more the sort of supernatural suspense fiction, like X-Files. Like that kind of horror where it's not in your face, it's not a bloodbath, it's not pushing your face in gore just to gross you out. But that kind of movie that just kind of leaves you with the sense that like there's something going on in this thing we called life beneath the surface, and it's mysterious. It kind of brings you into the mysterious, and in a more kind of potent way than I guess than other genres do. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a cool way to say it. I would agree with you.
What's your thought, though, on like horror that you would say people shouldn't be watching? I guess what we should say from the outset is like neither of us are saying that everybody should enjoy horror. Obviously, if you don't enjoy horror, don't watch horror, don't read horror. We're cool with that. We're not trying to make the case that you should be into it. But certainly I think I'm sympathetic to those who say like there's a lot of trashy horror out there and it can be immoral. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of kind of like teen horror. There's just like unnecessary like sex scenes and too much. I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to draw the line, I think. I think it's hard to say this is where you shouldn't. I think, do you find that with, I mean, you obviously talk about pornography a lot. Do you feel like people ask you that? Where's the line, like Game of Thrones, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Sorry, you go. Well, it's a good point, and I think one of the first things you have to do when, say, like trying to demonize pornography, which I would want to do, is define your terms. And so I think something similar has to be done, perhaps right at the outset when it comes to horror. So I just Googled this, and horror is defined as an intense feeling of fear, shock, or disgust. So I think what we could say is someone who authors, like you and I do, a horror story is deliberately inciting an intense feeling of fear, shock, or disgust. And my argument is that is not necessarily bad.
Mm.
So
yeah.
I like this. It's a kind of geeky logical thing called a modus tollens argument. And the formula of the argument, for those interested, goes, if P, then Q, not Q, therefore not P. And it's kind of logically sound and valid. And I think what we would say is this. If it's just going to come up with an example. If it's always wrong to watch horror, then it would be wrong to watch A Quiet Place. It's not necessarily wrong to watch A Quiet Place, therefore it's not always wrong to watch horror. And you could substitute any movie you like for it. But I think the bottom line is those people who would be very sort of reserved about horror and might want to kind of demonize the whole thing, they're going to have to throw out a lot of great works in Western literature, like even kind of relative recent works like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein or Dracula or the Alien movie or et cetera, et cetera.
The Passion.
Well, that's right. I mean, those scenes of Satan are bloody terrifying.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
By the way, I'm literally next door to a gymnasium. And by gymnasium, I mean gym. Because when you say gymnasium, you think of men in tight pants who are like flipping around on a horse thing. So you can probably hear that music, but let's just press on. Yeah, and then I think the other thing is like someone might say, okay, but like in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, St. Paul tells us to always think about those things that are good and true and beautiful, and so therefore we shouldn't subject ourselves to like bad things. But I don't think that works either, because obviously St. Paul's not saying never think of anything that's terrifying or dangerous. 1 Peter 5:8, right? Peter says the devil prowls around like a roaring lion. That's terrifying. I mean, how is a saint who receives a vision of hell and then recounts it, not recounting a horror story? And I don't think anyone would say that's illegitimate.
Yeah. Yep.
I have millions of thoughts. I'll shut up and let you talk.
Well, no, I kind of like listening to you because I agree with everything you're saying. I remember, because I don't know if you said this, but we've been writing these stories now for a year. And I remember last year sometime we had just finished writing Lady Long. And I was telling this story to a friend of mine at work, and I just kind of was off the cuff telling her this is what the plot is. Like she was like, I don't like horror, I'm never going to listen to it. But I was like, can I tell you what it is about anyway? I was like really excited because we had just written it. And by the end of me recounting this to her, she had tears in her eyes and she was terrified. And I was like, oh my God.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. But I don't know, like I was just trying to be objective. I was like, how can this be good to make my friend cry like this? So I don't know if it's just on a case-by-case basis. Like maybe she just knows I can't do horror and like I don't like it in the same way some people don't like romantic comedies, you know. So is it just kind of case-by-case or is it always wrong? Yeah, I think what you've just said proves that it's not always wrong. So
Right. I would say every story must involve some sort of tension, or else it's not really a story that's worth watching. Mm-hmm. Did you ever watch 24 with Jack Bauer?
Yeah.
I sometimes thought it would be funny if they did a season where Jack Bauer stayed home sick, and he just like goes to the toilet for 5 minutes. And then like
but the
sleeps.
Music is the same.
Yeah, exactly. You think like no one would watch that. There's no tension. Also, every story involves a protagonist and an antagonist, right? Even in like a rom-com, there's like the girl you're cheering for and then the bitch cheerleader that you're not cheering for, you know? And I think like in horror, that's just sort of accentuated. I would say that you would never want to glorify evil. And by glorify evil, I don't mean make evil win. Because sometimes evil does triumph in certain situations. As someone once said, sometimes Goliath just kicks the shit out of David. I love that. That was so funny. But, sometimes evil does win, and it's okay to depict it like that, but you would never want to depict evil as if it were good. Like, to go back to Hallmark for an example, there are Hallmark movies in which the message is basically, if you find somebody who is your soulmate, it's okay to abandon your husband and family and pursue him. Like, that seems to me to be a terribly evil thing to push. And likewise, in horror, you could portray the enemy, the evil, as if it were good, and I don't think you'd want to do something like that. But we live in a horrible world where horrible things happen, and so merely to depict that in a fictitious way, I think can be legitimate. And I hope that that's what we've done. I definitely struggle with it sometimes, Emma, as we write these stories together. Sometimes I'm like, I'm probably pressing a line. I hope this isn't bad, but I guess that's part of the creative process too.
I like the way that Jimmy Akin said it. Didn't he say like, I'm going to butcher this, so please reword it. He said something like, we have to rehearse it. Like we want to rehearse stories or play act or what did he say? Yeah. He was saying something like, even when you watch animals, they play fight because there will come a time where they're required to fight, and therefore they're preparing themselves to engage in a situation that they will find terrifying. Now, because human beings are rational beings, a lot of our horror doesn't come from mere physical fighting, but sort of like as we kind of intellectualize different possibilities that could befall us. And so that's why a lot of our horror, it's just like that. It's just like kids who would play hide and seek, for example. Like, that's kind of a scary thing. But you need to know how to handle scary situations. And when we're watching horror, that's part of kind of what we're doing. Also, I think it's important to point out that if you're a fan of if you're a fan of fairy tales, like if you think children should be read fairy tales and you're not really for the whole whitewashing of fairy tales, a lot of that is terrifying. I mean, you and I did a kind of rewrite of a Brother Grimm's fairy tale in which this woman is betrothed to a man who ends up just like killing women and eating them. That's a story that's in my children's book, which I have read to them. And so if you want to say, that's too far, it's like, okay, what about Hansel and Gretel? You have an old woman in a house made of gingerbread to entice children so she can fatten them up and eat them. That's more terrifying than Freddy Krueger. And yet, if you're okay telling that, you have to say that horror isn't intrinsically bad, or else that would be. Anyway, now that we've justified in our own minds what we've been doing for the last year, what did we talk about? I introduced you. I think you were flying back from Atlanta to Brisbane, and I said, "Hey, you've got to listen to Soren Narnia's excellent podcast, Knife Point Horror." Tell us about your experience with that. Yeah, I remember sitting in, because you were flying somewhere too, and you got me in some sort of lounge with free food. It was nice, and I was like, I don't want to fly for 20 hours back to Australia. I need some content. And I listened. I think I started at the very beginning of his podcast. So he wasn't even narrating them back then. But I just fell in love with it and then spent the next however many weeks just listening to every story. Oh. And eventually he begins to narrate them. And I don't know, like he's a really great storyteller. Like his writing is actually really good, but I really enjoy his acting, his voice acting as well. I think he's not over dramatic, and it's not like kind of stage horror. It's just like the way he tells his stories is from the position of a man who has experienced these things and is recounting them. And I know that that's how we wanted to write our podcast, because we just fell in love with it so much. How did you learn about it?
My friend, John Henry Spann, one of my best friends here, he put me onto it, and I just loved it. And I agree with you. He's a great storyteller. I love horror that isn't in your face. I love horror that is subtle and strange and eerie. That kind of like I had this idea. I was laying in bed last night about 3 a.m. My wife woke up because our son was a bit sick, and so we were just laying in bed. My poor wife, she hates that I'm on this horror kick. I'm like, I got an idea for a horror story. She's like, okay, tell me. I'm like, what if we right now heard an ice cream truck circling our neighborhood with that like music going on? How friggin' creepy would that be? and you go out and you just see the tail lights go down a street. You're like, what is going on? And one day you go out and it's like an old man and his wife who are trying to sell ice cream. Like, that would freak the heck out of me. And what I love about that is, like, it's not in your face. It's not grotesque. It's just bizarre. And like, for me, that's how a good horror story starts. When I think of this, like, oh my God, like, what if my dog looked at me and said, no one will believe you that I just started speaking and then turned around. That would ruin my life. That would ruin my life forever.
Oh, that's awesome. I remember you had a great idea for a story once that was a guy who could see some sort of monster out of the corner of his
Peripheral,
eye.
yeah.
Yeah, but if he looked at it, he knew that he would die. So he just lived his life seeing these monsters out of the corner of his eyes, but not fully being able to look at them.
Totally.
I was just like, man, that's terrifying.
So what I'm going to do right now, Emma, is I'm going to pull up our Sibling Horror page and show everybody what it looks like. So I'm going to share the screen with them. And maybe we can kind of start going through these stories and kind of explain how they were written and things like that, unless you wanted to say anything first.
No, that sounds great.
All right, let me see if I can pull this up. All right. Yeah, so here it is here. We've written, how many stories have we written now?
I think 12 that are live.
Wow. So why don't we go back to the beginning, just talk about what it was like writing each of these. I'm showing the folks right now. So we're looking at the first one, Jonathan Doyle's last blog post. So this is one I took the lead on, and the whole idea was not about a story that happened, because all of our stories are first-person recountings, like it is with Soren's Knife Point Horror. I really like that first-person recounting, because I think it's really horrific. I mean, Frankenstein is like that. Dracula is like that, and I really like that. Anyway, so the whole idea with this one is like there's this guy, and he's got a next-door neighbor that's super weird, and one day a bunch of weird strangers show up and do weird things to him, and he doesn't know what the hell's going on. And yeah, I remember I was writing that in New Hampshire in a coffee shop called Ollie's and Me and Ollie's, I think. And it was fall, which is like the creepiest time to write. And so that was our first one. And we should point out too that Soren Narnia from Knife Point Horror was so generous in agreeing to narrate these stories for us from the get-go.
Yeah, that was it for us, hey, because we were like, oh, we can do it, but we've got these ugly Australian accents, and sometimes when you go onto Fiverr and you're looking for like people to narrate, they're so dramatic. And
yes.
Yeah, it was just a very big blessing that Soren was willing to narrate these.
Now, tell us about this one, unless you had something to say about Jonathan. Oh, I got to tell people this one. So I don't want to ruin this for people, but this is funny. So we had this idea that the person writing this, Jonathan Doyle, would go over to his next door neighbor's house and realize there's no furniture in this place. Like, what the heck happened here? And then he finds that cellar door and he walks down. And I was on a phone call with you as I was getting on an airplane. I'm like, what should he find? Like, what should he find? And then I just had this weird idea of what if the people just like spread his body across the room like weird decorative art, like just started peeling his body. And you're like, that is terrifying. So that's what we did.
Yeah, I think your line was, oh yeah, and his dog Brutus was in the middle.
Yeah, like the ovary of a wilting flower.
Yeah.
Super creepy.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so gross.
And then, okay, let's talk about your next story, the story that you took the lead on, because this one, a lot of people say this is their absolute favorite one. So tell us about Burger Castle and how you wrote that.
For sure. I watched a lot of Buffy growing up, and she gets a job at this place called the Meat Palace. And I thought, how can I do a twist on that? So I decided to call the place Burger Castle. And this is one of those stories where I originally wrote it from a woman talking, but then we just realized that we love Soren so much, we need to make it a guy. But also I do this thing where when I write for men, I write them like they're women because I'm a woman, and you've corrected me on that a few times. Yeah, so the concept of this one is just two people who are studying late. They want some fast food. They go, they drive, order their food. They're told to wait. It doesn't come out. This guy's friend goes inside to check what's going on. He doesn't come back. The main character goes inside. It's all dark. And I just thought it would be terrifying if if they went into the staff room and there was just this old man with his hands folded, just kind of like this sort of smile, like like just a real calm smile, and just the whole time like not moving. And just how terrifying that would be to be in a huge empty building in this one little room, this man at the end. And yeah, obviously the main character freaks out and tries to get out. All the doors are locked. And then, yeah. Mm. Yeah. I find that, when you're watching horror films and you're just like yelling at the main character, telling them what to do. I was really trying to get into the zone of like, what
Right.
would I do? And I was almost scaring myself a bit. And I was just like, I don't know, just that idea came to me. And
Love it.
and
Someone
then
just you go.
no, you go.
Someone in the comment section just said this. Nick L said, "You know a story is good when you look at those videos and one jumps out even though you haven't heard it in like 10 months. Looking at you, Burger Castle."
Thanks, Nicole. We were also debating a lot about you had the idea for this guy's head to be this mozzarella ball.
Oh, yeah, that was
Remember
awesome.
that?
Yeah, because I remember thinking, like, I want us to be violent. I don't want this just to be like a, well, it's a Catholic thing, so nobody really gets hurt. And then I had the idea, what if he cuts his head off and fries it in the fryer and you see it like a big mozzarella ball, which I love that we were always subtle about. I've had some people listen to that story and not actually know until I told them that that's what happened.
Oh, cool. And this is another story because I really liked setting stories back in like the 80s and 90s. And we were like, would they have mobile phones back then? And we were researching like, when did the first mobile phone come out? And,
Yep.
Yeah.
You know what's funny about that story is you're writing from Australia, right? And so sometimes there's these Australianisms that actually accidentally get in there. So like you're writing about an American town, American people, and yet we accidentally said, like it was December, and we said the air was warm and sticky, which I think is something you would say in December in Australia, except this was in America, but too late. Now we just have to pretend it was meant to be some artistic thing.
Now it's a parallel universe.
Exactly. Yeah. All right.
And
you go.
I was just a final comment on this one. I like when the main character's like recounting the story at the end and the video footage is like different. And I think, not to try and have a moral message with every story, but I think sometimes when we experience trauma, we actually do remember the facts wrong because we go into defense mode. So that was something that I wanted to happen as well. Also, I just wanted it to be a weird ending and like what actually happened.
Yeah, no, I like that. And actually, one of the things about Jonathan Doyle's last blog post that I liked was there was this sense that when these people show up at the door, you feel a strange inclination to let them in and a strange sympathy for them, and they end up leading you to ruin. And so the idea there was the same thing with temptation. You know, like when we see it at a distance, it appears horrifying. When we see it at play in another person's life, whether that be like adultery or drunkenness or whatever, it's horrifying. But when it's up close and personal, we can begin to make friends with it, and it can lead to our ruin, you know?
Yeah.
All right, so I have to say, I think my favorite story might be, as far as what scares me the most, The Man Under My Bed.
This title alone.
It's so scary. So first of all, before we go any further, Emma, tell us about who did the artwork.
Oh, totally, yeah. I have a good friend in England. His name is Joseph Daly, and I just love him so much. His creativity and his brain, it's like every idea he has, I'm just in love with. Like, he's an incredible songwriter. He's an incredible artist. His main thing is like he films short films. Maybe we can put a link to his short films in the show notes after this. But yeah, Joe does all our art and he's very gifted, and I'm super grateful that he does it.
Yeah. So this Man Under My Bed one. So basically, Emma, I don't know if I've told you this story or not, but when I was a kid, I used to have dreams that there was a good dad, like our dad, and an evil dad, and they both looked the same, but one of them was super psychotic and was pretending to be a mouse and was like scurrying under the table, which I know sounds funny, but I think it was Stephen King who said there's a fine line between comedy and horror. And that I still remember those dreams as a child. I don't know what it was, but then I had like my real dad who wanted to defend me, and I couldn't tell which one was which. And so this story was kind of like that, where, anyway, I don't know what to say about the story, but it's...
We originally called it Lego Man, hey, because of how he breaks down, but I like this name.
Now, I stole this idea. Well, I didn't steal it, but I kind of got the idea from Soren. He had this idea... I forget the name of his story, but basically a man walks into a room and there's a man standing in the chair or sitting in the chair, and then all of a sudden the man's body parts kind of disseminate across the room, and they're kind of like in the wall, and there's a leg in the ceiling and a head on the floor. And the uncanniness of that terrified me. So the reason we called this Lego man to those watching was basically this man is under the bed and the boy doesn't know what to do. And if you remember, Emma, I wanted the Catholic part of this to be super subtle. I'd never want to preach in these. We said, the boy said, I touched my head, my stomach, and both my shoulders, and then I heard a cracking sound, a sort of splintering sound, the way ice might sound when it's melting. And then I think I said something like, the man, I would soon discover, had fallen apart. He had broken apart like pieces of Lego. And then the fake father comes up and starts scooping the Lego man out from under the bed. Legs, shins, shoulder, like that is so horrifying to me. My only regret with this story is I wish it was like an hour longer. I hate that I started at the ending. I wish I had have built it up a lot more.
Well, Joe, our friend in England, he said if we can start a Kickstarter, he'll make a short film. So maybe we can get him to extend it.
Yeah, let's ask people in the comments right now if you're interested in some of these being turned. We have 225 people watching. Let us know, and maybe we'll do something like that. All right, what about this next one, Emma? I'm sure.
Oh, can I just make a comment quickly about
please.
Men under the bed? My favorite part of that, because how does it start? He wakes up, he hears a noise, he goes downstairs, he sees his dad, and he goes back in his room, and then there's this dad hiding under his bed.
No, what happens is he's laying in bed one night and he hears someone say outside of his house, I'm outside your house. And then he hears someone say, I'm at your door. I'm in your house. I'm walking up the stairs. So this man is not the father, right? This is the man under the bed. And this kid freaks out. He runs downstairs into his father's bedroom, and his father is beneath his room dusting from the ceiling fan. Now, there's a really important point here with the dust. It actually refers back to Dante's Inferno. But anyway, this dad is not his real dad. And so the dad doesn't seem to care that his son is freaking out. He walks upstairs and says, what's the matter? And the boy points to the lump in his mattress. And the father says, yeah, go for it.
That is my absolute favorite part. Just the fact that this evil dad picked a deliberately horrible hiding spot. Like, you said that he hides under his bed and his back bulges the mattress and his Nikes are poking out the bottom. It's so terrifying.
No, do you remember that bit with the dad? I said he maneuvered himself. He laid on his belly and maneuvered under the bed like a large insect.
Yes.
And then do you remember he starts? Before that he starts giggling and his body starts shaking
terrifying. And my favorite part that you wrote in that story was kind of at the end when everything settles. There was my room as it had always been. No body parts, no fake father under the bed. So good.
That scares me the most. All right,
let's probably share dreams about
it. Let's move on to this story, which you took the lead on, which is excellent. County Fair.
Yeah, for sure. So this one is a story about a guy who has a divorce, and he's kind of dealing with that, and he decides to travel away for the weekend, and he finds himself at this fair. And he has a sweet tooth, and this woman's selling cotton candy, or fairy floss, as we call it in Australia. And he just has this weird encounter with her. She's blind, but she kind of looks at him. And anyway, these weird things start happening. He eventually goes camping, and he thinks he sees this animal in the woods, and he goes and tells, the camp. I don't even know what they call it in America. The people who take care of the camp at the office.
Yeah, I don't know, what would we call a park ranger, that kind of thing?
Yes, that is what you call them. And he sort of learns that there's this killer in the area. And what's the part about this story that's weird is that this killer kind of copycats him. So there's this one scene when he's back in the fair and he's in the bathroom and all the lights go off and he's breathing and he hears this other voice that's mirroring his breathing.
Yes.
And there's this point where one of the park rangers is like, what the hell is going on? And he hears that mirror voice back. And I don't know. I just thought that would be really terrifying. When you were younger and people would just copy what you were saying and it would just be so frustrating. But imagine that in the horror zone,
Yeah, totally.
I remember I originally wrote this guy crying in the bathroom stall, but you were like, nah, men don't cry. I don't agree with that, but I let you have it.
No, yeah, it's fair. It's fair enough. Yeah, It was fun, kind of going back and forth. What did you find frustrating about that process?
I think the only thing that's frustrating is when it takes a long time, only because I'm impatient, and this story was particularly long.
Yep.
And you want to get it right. Like if you're putting it out to the world, you want to get it right. But it's kind of like with songwriting, it gets to a point where it's like, okay, we just need to start a whole new song because I'm so done with this.
Yeah, totally. I want to let you go.
I'm happy with it. Like I think this is one of the ones where the horrible thing was actually a real person. There were still weird bits about it, but yeah.
Yeah, no, this was really good. I've heard somebody say, and I've experienced this too, that a story or a book or even a song is never finished, only abandoned. I don't know how you feel about that, but for those who are watching, we just submitted a story to Soren to read. It should be coming out before Halloween. It's going to be called The Taxidermist. And yeah, same thing. I hated the story when I sent it to him. I still hate it. And it's because I've been looking at it so long, and I'm just sort of done with it. All right, this next one I want to look at is Lady Long. This is one of the first stories I had in mind. And the idea is I wake up one day, it's 4 a.m., I can't sleep, I go out and I start making coffee, and a light turns on outside my window, the sort of security light. I look out there, but I'm not too disturbed because, usually a deer or some other forest creature might be rummaging around back there. No problem. I look up. Yeah, no worries. The light goes off. I continue to make coffee. And then the light goes on again. This time it stays on. And I look out and I see an old woman sitting on my child's swing set with her hands raised impossibly high, snaking around the plastic-coated chains and, as it were, hanging over the wooden bar. And then the lights go out.
Yeah. And I remember when I think you wrote like the first part, exactly all of that. And I was just like, oh my gosh, can I do something with this?
Yes.
And a lot of people like this one as well. This is a longer story. The main character is an accountant. We did some research. When would he be busy? What time of year? We wanted him to have a family that weren't there. He kind of, this woman who we call Lady Long sort of terrorizes this other woman that he's working with and her son. And usually I can't do kids in horror. Like It won the Stephen King book and film. Couldn't do It One because kids are amazing and I just can't watch
the
them
book
die.
is super gross. I don't know if you know that. The book has these rape scenes. It's super gross.
Yeah, definitely can do that.
But
then It Too is like they're all grown up. So I'm like, I can do adults in pain, but not. But we broke the rule here and this woman kind of terrorizes this little boy and my favorite scene probably in there is when he's got black crayon and he's covered the entire room in black. And there's this fascination that the little boy and the main character seem to have with this color black. And complete spoiler, by the end of it, this main character is trying to deal with what's happened and he just gets this full tattoo all around his neck where the woman was like choking him. And I was really happy with that ending, I think.
Yeah, that was your idea. I love that. That was such a cool thing. You know what was funny is I love subtleties in stories, and some of your emphasis on the people becoming obsessed with black was so subtle that I remember like Soren, our the one who narrated it, just like removed a few things. I'm like, no, that was, I know it seemed like the bit where he goes to make coffee, goes for the creamer, and then decides to shut the door and not have it and have it black instead. Like those sorts. I don't even know if that ended up making in it. But yeah, that was...
Yeah. And that nursery rhyme, I don't know why I thought Soren added that, but did you write that?
I wrote that. I was about to send it off to him, and I was going through it one more time, and I thought what would make this especially creepy is if while that kid was drawing on the wall, he was like saying something about a lady. And it was... So I think what I did is I looked up a poem about a woman. I think that's all I did. And then I changed some of the lyrics around to make it creepier. And so when the protagonist eventually escapes Lady Long, he's found in the woods mumbling those words to himself. So that was super creepy. All right, this next story I'm super excited about. I think it's one of our best. You wrote this. It's excellent. It's called Running Man. And
I think it's funny that you think that because I'm like, this is one of the worst ones.
I love it because it's so different as far as a horror. I think even when Soren got back to us, he's like, cool twist on the horror genre. Do you want to tell us about it?
Yeah, so I was on a flight from Brisbane to Perth for 5 hours, and you had paid for me to take that Joyce Carol Oates masterclass on short story writing,
Yeah.
and one of her biggest things is like when you write a story, and advice you have said as well, write drunk and edit sober. So like just write it all out, but then you actually have to go back over again and again and again and again and make it good. And I'm like very impulsive, very impatient. It's very hard for me to do, but I was like, I've got 5 hours to Perth, let's do it. And I was training for a half marathon, I think, at the time, so I was very familiar with running. And there's this one track in Brisbane by the river that I had in my brain that I was kind of picturing. And then I was having a conversation with my friend who does presentations in schools, and he was telling me about this video where you watch it and it's people playing basketball, and you have to count how many times the ball is passed. And then at the end, it's like, did you see the gorilla? And there's this gorilla that like walks into the scene. And it's the whole point of it is like you can be so focused on something and miss something so obvious. And I don't know, that just gave me the worst feeling in the world. And then I found it online, and what made the video more brilliant was that it was filmed in just a while ago. So it's all kind of grainy footage, and they're like in front of an elevator, and it's just weird. And I had this idea, like, what if this guy was going for a run and this killer is pursuing him and is looking for him frantically and actually makes eye contact with him and then keeps running and like doesn't see him because he's so in this adrenaline frantic. And I just thought, oh, that'd be sick. So maybe it's an okay story.
I think it's great. I mean, I found it really scary, and just the whole thing was just really creepy, but no one dies in it, which is very, very interesting too. Someone just said, not my stupid but forgetting this. I might be stupid but forgetting this, but this is your sister, not your wife. Yes, everybody, this is my sister, Emma Fradd. She lives in Brisbane. We write horror stories together. We have a podcast called Sibling Horror. All right, let's look at this next one here. This is one of my favorites too, and it's called The Infestation. This is the kind of first one we did that had to do with the spiritual and with the demonic. And if you remember, Emma, for the longest time, I think you were slightly reluctant to do a story about the demonic, and then I think you were okay with it, hopefully, or else.
I think generally when I watch horror films, for some reason, I just like stay away from the demonic. I don't know. I don't know why. I just kind of made that rule for myself. You had a good argument against it, though.
I forget what it was.
I don't remember what it was, but you convinced me.
It was great, whatever it was. Yeah, so the point of this story is you've got this liberal priest who barely believes in God, most certainly does not believe in the demonic, and a parishioner comes to him one day and says that her house is infested with an evil spirit and she doesn't know what to do about it. And I thought to myself, like, what would he do? And so he puts her off forever. He thinks she's crazy, thinks she's superstitious, thinks she's way too pious. But then one day he goes to bless her house, because that's what she's been begging him to do for the longest time. And, he has an encounter that he cannot explain, and it terrifies him. And so he relays this story to somebody who reaches out to the diocesan exorcist. The diocesan exorcist contacts him. They agree to meet. All right, so this liberal priest really doesn't like this diocesan exorcist. He thinks he's way too traddy. He wears the beretta. Like, he's just, everything kind of wrong with the church. But it's only with the help of this trad old priest that they're able to kind of confront the evil and do something about it. So this was our longest story so far. I mean, we have had longer ones, but this one was 51 minutes. What were your thoughts on this one?
I just love that you did a bit of research, hey? Like, you chatted with some priests, I want to say, maybe.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. I spoke to some people, yeah.
I was really impressed with it. I just thought it was written really well. And unfortunately, like, there are priests that don't believe in the devil. It's like, why are you a priest? Like,
you are doing being a priest wrong.
Yeah. So I think it was good. It was actually a good learning experience for me. It's like, actually you can acknowledge Satan. You have to follow him. And it's a good reminder that Jesus always has the victory. And I thought it was a great story.
Yeah. In fact, every demonic occurrence in this story comes from a story that is purported to be real. I don't know if you know that or not. I didn't make up anything in this. I actually took all these stories that I have heard from people I either know or I've heard recounting stories. The dreams that the guy had about the about the dog with no whites in its eyes who screams at him, the chalice. That's actually a dream I had shortly after my conversion. So even though this is a fictitious story, all of the kind of horrific parts of it are based on real events. And then the other thing I think people didn't get when they read this story was that there wasn't just the demonic at work. There was also a soul in purgatory who was kind of beseeching the prayers of those in the house.
Right.
I actually read this.
That's cool.
I read this in Thomas Aquinas recently about, whether I think you saw it, about ghosts, and he says like someone from purgatory can reveal themselves to us to beseech our prayers. And so, do you remember that terrifying bit? This is probably the scariest bit for me. Is when that boy comes to the door and he says, "You haven't come to let her out, have you? It's really important to us that you don't let her out." All right, so he's a demon referring to a soul in purgatory, and so the priest is like, "I have no idea what you're talking about. Are you referring to a dog or something?" And he says,
right.
and then the Satan or the demon threatens him. He says, "Dogs, swine, no swine to be sent into this time, only you." Sort of like threatening him with possession, which he doesn't understand. So anyway, there was that.
Good one, Satan, but the priest doesn't believe in you, so he doesn't understand.
He doesn't know what's going on. So yeah, but
that was the scariest part for me. That boy, he was like a little bit fat, maybe.
Exactly.
Your details about the boy was just like,
fat, red shirt or white shirt, I forget, but just super nonchalant. All right, this next one, The Man in Yellow, was pretty great.
Yes, Eric builds safe rooms for a living, and one night he hits a guy on the highway, and the guy starts stalking him. And I just had a memory of we wanted this guy to be so this guy's all in yellow, like a yellow trench coat or whatever, and you had this idea of what if his trench coat was folded up really nicely and placed at the very bottom of like the bed, so that when he climbs into bed that night, his feet feel it, but then when he like rips off the covers and turns the light on, it's like folded really nicely. Just thought that was a nice detail. It's a bit of a...
Did you mention the main point when he hits the man? I forget. I may have missed you say that.
Oh, sorry. So he hits the... Oh, yeah, I totally didn't say that.
Yeah.
So he's driving home one night. He hits a guy on the highway. He stops the car and he can't find him anywhere. So he goes home and he has no release. He has... I think he confesses it to the police maybe even, and they're like, "We can't find a body." So he lives in this weird in between where like he knows he's committed a crime. He wants to be, remorseful or whatever, but there's no proof. And then this man starts sort of stalking him and showing up in impossible places. And I think the scary scene for me was when this guy, he gets himself into his safe room because this man is in his house. And I wanted him to hold the expression that he made when he was hit by the car. So like, I wanted that terrifying expression to be plastered on his face, so that when he's walking around his house looking for him, the guy in the safe room is looking on all the cameras and he can just see this guy's face that does not change and he's looking around everywhere. I thought that'd be really creepy. Yeah.
My favorite part, I had a lot of favorite parts of the story, but as you say, the man barricades himself in a safe room and he's writing an email. That's the whole point. This whole story is an email he's writing to an unknown person because he's tried to tell everybody that this is something that happened to him. He even starts confessing to his friends at work and they don't believe him. They look at him like he's crazy. And he keeps saying, like, "I'm not crazy. I know that sounds like I'm crazy because I just said I'm not crazy, but still I'm not crazy." Yeah. And what I love is he says, "I'm clicking send now." And he clicks send, and then you had a friend of yours read, what did she read? Do you remember?
It was something like unknown sender, or like your email didn't go through.
Your email
basically
could not be delivered. And I love the despair of that. It's like it's your last chance to reach out. You put everything into this email, and just as you're about to get killed by this like supernatural thing, no one will ever know about it.
Yeah. And how
I probably
many of those stories
shouldn't
are
love
there?
that, but I do.
And that story is a bit of a nod to the Knife Point horror story Staircase, which is my absolute favorite. Oh man, if you should just stop listening to us right now and just go listen to Staircase.
Go listen to Staircase by Knife Point Horror. It is the best. It is terrifying.
The ending of the story where he realizes that Karen left her jumper or her raincoat or something in his house, and he's like, "I had to call the police to come and get it."
That was awesome. All right, this next story, Looking for Jason Jennings. I've had a few people say to me that this was their favorite. This is the longest story, longest story we've done so far. And you took the lead on this one, so you want to tell us about it?
Sure. a guy makes a friend with a guy at work who suddenly just starts to act strange. He's not his jolly self, and then he sort of disappears. There's a nearby sort of ghost town that his mum is familiar with called Monsoon Point, and he sort of gets this idea that maybe that's where Jason went, so he goes and explores. And I just wanted this town to be totally weird. I really love it in short stories where people eat and drink. I don't know why. I don't know. It feels really natural.
I do too.
So,
I think part of it is it sort of it gives another dimension to the reader. When you begin to smell things and taste things, you're kind of like engaging all of the senses of the reader. That's what I like about it myself.
Yeah, cool. So he goes to this pancake parlor. He talks to the woman there. Has anyone come through this town? It's a really small town. They're like, no. And then he realizes halfway through the conversation that she's not writing down his order. She's actually writing a description of the main character. He goes and stays at this motel. It's really weird. And it kind of escalates where he ends up going to this home, and he realizes that the reason why this town is so weird is because it's a community who force people to murder people, who force people to take the lives of another, whether it be through blackmail or whatever. Man, I feel like we changed that ending so many times, but that's what happened. How does it end? He doesn't find Jason.
He doesn't find Jason, but the ending was really cool because one of the things we did was Monsoon Point. We had the idea that it was like a spider web that wanted to draw people into itself. There was kind of a supernatural element to it. And so when he concludes the story, he says he's going back to the town to find Jason Jennings. But we can't really tell if because I think he says, I have a job to finish or something like that.
That's right.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, someone just shared this as a comment, Emma. I got to share this because this sounds terrifying. Anne Dagda says, worst dream I had was that I had died and was drifting through the darkness of space whilst in the fetal position, cut off from all light and love. Ooh.
Wow. That is not what you were made for. It's terrifying.
It's terrifying. I heard a story. I forgive me for not remembering what it was, but it was about this idea of a spaceman who finds himself on an asteroid drifting throughout space, and he has 2 vials that he had taken with him from Earth. One was a sort of a drink that would kill him, and the other was one that would give him eternal life. And I suppose that was there should he find a place he would wish to live forever. And so he's in utter despair and opens up the vial to kill himself, and then discovers that he has actually drunk the potion that will now make it such that he will never die. And so he's just drifting throughout space for all eternity, unable to die. Ooh.
Wow. That's good. That's a story you've got to abandon, I think.
It's pretty
There's only so much of that you can.
That's right. Do you want to move on to Man Flesh?
Yeah. So this is one that you wrote?
Yeah, so this is a story that was based on a Brother Grimm's tale, again, about man-eaters. And so what we did is we wrote it from a first-person perspective. And this one's different because we paid a woman that Soren knows, a friend of Soren's who reads on his podcast, to read this one for us. So it was kind of nice to have it was a bit different. Do you remember, and I think you were right to do this, that you were like, you need to take a bunch of this stuff out? Because some of it was really grotesque. You're like, no.
I think there was maybe a bit of, was there some sort of rape or some sort of...
There wasn't rape, but I don't want to recount what did happen because that's the thing you told me to take out, and I don't want to say it live. So. It was something
sort of in maybe that genre. I don't know.
Yeah, there was definitely some gross bit. But you know what's funny is all that I wrote was pretty much in the Brother Grimm's fairy tales that we read to our kids. Like, that's how creepy it was.
Wow.
But one of the things I like about this story is that there was a bird there, and I made it a gang cockatoo, which for those who are interested is my favorite bird. I love this bird.
Tell the story.
Whenever I would see a gang, I'm going to show people right now. Buckle up, everybody. Whenever I would see this bird as a child, my dad had a big book on birds. I would cry when I would see it as a kid and not know why I was crying and ask my dad and mum why I was crying. And I think the reason I was crying was because I just thought it was so beautiful.
That is the cutest story in the world.
I think I would have been like 5, maybe younger. I just looked at it and it just moved me. Anyway.
Black cockatoo with a red head, yeah?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the male. I think the female has a black head, but yeah. So anyway. All right, let's see here.
That's sick.
So, okay, there's that one. All right, now let's move on to this one, which is excellent. And this is probably the most reminiscent of the story you just mentioned by Soren. His story, what's it called? Staircase? Is that the name of it? That Soren wrote? Oh, have you freezed? Oh, and we are reconnecting, everybody. This is the joys of live discussions.
Hello.
Hey, no problem. They just blacked out for a sec. I was saying that Imposter is the most reminiscent of Soren's Staircase. Is that the name of it?
Yeah. That's what it's called. Oh, cool.
So tell us about Imposter, because people said that. They're like, this is amazing.
A man wakes up in the middle of the night. He can hear something downstairs. He goes to investigate. It's kind of dark. It's his wife, who should be in Denver. And then he realizes halfway through the conversation that, is this his wife? And I remember we changed at the very last minute. He turns the light on and he looks at his wife, and it's one of those weird situations where it's not his wife, but she looks so much like her that he is just kind of freaked out for a few seconds and is just trying to figure out, like, what is going on? Like, you look like her, but you're so different. Like, your eye is a different color or something. Anyway, he's a cop, so he's kind of going along with it, and kind of comes to a head where there's this scene where she basically goes into bed and goes to sleep, and then basically he kind of freaks out. And we were thinking a lot about this ending. We were thought, oh, maybe this could be like a throwback, and when he was younger, his mum picked him up from school and it wasn't really her. Or I tried another ending where his friend is also, but I was like, no, let's just make it the one person. It just felt a bit too forced doing any other people. And
what I found creepy about this, right, is, as you say, he wakes up, he sees this woman who's pretending to be his wife. It's dark. She looks like his wife, sounds like his wife. He gradually becomes aware of the fact that it is not, in fact, his wife. And so he doesn't know what to do. As you say, he's a cop, so he's like, he knows where the gun is in the house. He's trying to figure out how to handle the situation. All of a sudden, he turns around and she's upstairs. And he doesn't know how she got up there so quickly. He follows her up there and she's under the bed. And I think he turns the light on and she gets angry with him. And her body seems to grow and she yells at him. And I think you said something like, she seemed angry that I wasn't willing to participate in this game that she was playing.
Yeah.
And she said, things won't go well for you now, or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's Imposter. Did you have anything else to say?
My only thing is I wasn't super in love with the ending. Another kind of similar to The Man Under the Bed. I wish that it was longer, but I just didn't know how to make it longer. So it was just like, well, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Put it out there.
Yeah. Let's look at this last story, Emma, and then we'll ask people who are watching the video maybe if they have a few questions that maybe we might be able to answer about the process of writing fiction or anything else, and we'd be happy to try and answer some of them. But this final one, Emma, you took the lead on, Missing Cat.
Yeah. Was really happy with this story. It all started because I got a missing cat flyer in my letterbox. And I actually originally wrote this entire story from the point of Amber. So just a brief snippet. This guy called Charles is writing a story about his sister Amber, who's had a bit of a troubled childhood. Her cat goes missing. They go on this journey to find the cat. It turns out Amber is not what she seems, and he didn't even know as the brother. So I originally wrote this from the point of Amber, and I wanted her to be this compulsive liar, and I wanted her to trick the reader into sort of kind of seeing her as a bit of a victim and being on her side. But then when the story ended and I shared it with people, they were kind of like, this is actually too confusing. And again, another thing that probably tipped the scale was like, it would be just way better if Soren read this. So we were like, let's put it from the perspective of the brother so we can get Soren to read it, but also the voice is more trusting if we like Charles and we trust him, and he's kind of recounting this story about Amber. So the weird scene that kind of got me was when so the cat goes missing. This guy finds the cat, brings it back to her, but it's this weird feral cat. It's like not her cat. And yeah, and then the final scene. This is a huge spoiler. I feel like, yeah, but yeah.
Stop now if you don't want it to be spoiled. Yeah.
The sort of final scene is where Charles is in the police station and he's seeing his sister being interviewed, and she's just like a completely different person, and she's just lying, and she's basically talking about this man and woman who stole her cat, who tried to kill them, and she's putting things in their life and saying that it's part of their story that was actually part of her childhood, so she's kind of projecting it. And the thought was that Amber basically just kills people, and and then she lies and she blames it. She kind of blames it on other people, and then at the end of the story, she kind of moves, and Charles is left with this question: what do I do? Do I go to the police and tell them my sister is not who she is, or do I go and find my sister? And it's a crucial question because Charles doesn't really have any other people in his life. He doesn't believe in God. His parents are dead. His sister was like his one rock. And you read that he doesn't believe in God, and the whole thing that he's writing is kind of a journal entry to God, kind of saying, like, is my sister possessed? Like, what is going on? And the question is left unanswered because often we ask God the wrong question. So,
yeah. That's awesome. All right, so that takes us through all of the stories thus far. I wanted to let everybody know that Emma and I have a brand new story that will drop before Halloween, so do us a favor and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. It's called Sibling Horror. Subscribe on Spotify or your podcast app through your Apple Store. We'll also release it, on our little YouTube channel there. And this story is called Taxidermist, which we won't give away, but it's the story of a man who is a taxidermist. A young woman comes into his shop one day. He finds himself very smitten by her, and she has a lot of questions about taxidermy. And you will see why. It's a story that should be quite long, maybe around an hour. As I say, I just sent this to Soren the other day, and I was just super pissed with it. I was just like, okay,
it's really good. Don't listen to him.
That's very nice of you.
You've been in it too long, but it's written really, really well, and yeah, there's some great writing and horrifying scenes.
Okay. Yeah, so thanks. So you guys can check that out. We're not, yeah, so anyway, maybe we'll take a couple of questions, Emma. Do you have time, or do you need to get going? It's fine.
No, I'm good.
All right, So if anyone has questions, we've got, around 200 people watching right now. Feel free to write it in the live stream, and we'd be happy to take your question, and you can direct it to me or Emma or both of us. Let's see here. Can you hear that music behind me?
It's really faint.
Yes.
Yeah.
That makes me feel good.
Yeah, hardly hear it.
Anne Dagda says, it's not really a question, but watching the daily news cycle these days fulfills any desire for horror that I might have. Level 5 lockdown for Christmas. Ouch. Okay, very good.
Man, yeah, it's true. I remember growing up being like, Mum and Dad, why do you watch the news? Like, it's horrible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, talking about forming our imagination. If you've got a serious... Oh, look, Fradd Lanks. I don't know if you know who that is. She says, Emma is the coolest. Well done.
Hi, Fradd Lanks. I don't know who you are.
This person, lover of the arts, says she was talking about a missing cat. Okay, no, she's talking to somebody else. That doesn't work. What's Paul Quenzel says, what's the ink on Emma's right arm?
Let me show you a pixel version. It's the Virgin Mary with 7 swords in her heart.
Mm-hmm. Bloody lovely. This bloke, Lindsay Purdy, says, ask Emma if she's seen the children's show Bluey. Your children would love it. Mine do. I
haven't heard it, but my friend Hogan at work talks about it all the time.
Cool. Kensington E says, do you self-edit or use a professional editor? Yeah, we send it to an editor once we're done. And we use Google Docs, and so he goes through it and edits it, and we get to see all the changes. And then sometimes we agree or disagree or rewrite, things like that. It's a good question. Feel free to...
It's really helpful.
Yeah. Let's see. This person, Patrick, says, I'm a teacher at high school. Some of my students are dressing up as devils or demons for Halloween. They ask me, what is too far? What do you think I should tell them? So I haven't thought this through a great deal, but I'm of the opinion that if you're dressing up as a demon, you're probably not doing it to kind of show the seriousness of the issue. You're probably doing it not even just kind of mock Satan. You're probably doing it as almost like an atheist, probably, right? If someone's like dressing up, So I'd be against something like that. To me, I think that could probably be done or mistaken to be... there's no context to that, and I could see that being kind of trivializing the demonic. That's my immediate...
Okay.
What do you think?
I don't know. I have a really hard time being like, here's an objective answer.
No, I think that's good. That's honest.
I think it's just like, do what you want. Like, if you want to dress up as a demon because you love Satan and you want to glorify Satan, that's wrong.
Good.
So, but if not, like, I don't know.
I also think like there's a difference between like writing a horror story that people have to actually buy into. I don't mean buy into in the sense of like want to listen to, but actually have to choose to listen to. Right? They're going to a horror podcast, they click on it, they choose to listen to it. I think that's different to like dressing up as a demon and showing up in people's faces who, maybe didn't know that that's what they were in for. Anyway.
Yeah.
Ryan McCandles says, I have heard that writing good stories, you have to read good stories. In order to write good stories, you have to read good stories. Besides Soren stuff, what else are you reading? Go for it.
Let me get some books from my bookshelf.
Nice. All right. Well, while she's doing that, let me tell you, I've been reading a little bit as far as horror, H.P. Lovecraft, also Edgar Allan Poe. I was just telling him Edgar Allan Poe and H.P. Lovecraft have been some of the horror authors I've been reading lately. What about you?
I've been reading a lot of Shirley Jackson.
Yeah.
The Haunting of Hill House was really good.
Did you? And you got through it?
Yep, loved it. And I just finished reading We Have Always Lived in the Castle. The great thing about this edition is that Joyce Carol Oates writes an afterword, which is very well written. And I love reading and just kind of like underlining and making notes and why do I like what I like. I also just finished reading this. I don't know if I told you that, but
yeah, you did. That's awesome.
Brave New World. It's really good as well.
I like 1984. Did you read 1984?
Yeah, you got it for me.
I found that way more terrifying. It's such a good book. Anyway, Jonathan the Melkite asks, what is Emma's favorite horror movie?
I feel like I haven't seen it yet, but I really like A Quiet Place.
Yeah.
I also, have you seen The Gift? It's more a thriller.
No.
I thought The Gift was really good. Yeah, my favorite film is Kill Bill. It's probably not horror, but
yeah.
What's your favorite? Do you have a favorite?
My favorite horror movie is probably The Shining. Or The Exorcist. But The Shining I thought was excellent. Yeah, really, really scary. Father John Brown, SJ, so you have a Jesuit here. No offense, Father John Brown, for making the protagonist in the Infestation a Jesuit. I'm not sure if people realize this, but the head of the Jesuits is the person who actually said something like Satan doesn't really exist. It's more of a kind of a literary device. Or anyway, if you actually look at what the protagonist in the Infestation says, I basically take that quote directly from the head of the Jesuits who denied that demons exist and put it in his mouth. Anyway, he becomes good in the end, as I'm sure you are, Father John. Of course, there are great Jesuits out there. But he says, Matt and Emma, what do y'all think about zombie genre?
I love survival horror.
Me too.
Just something about it. I feel like, I love it. So I really enjoyed The Walking Dead years ago when that came out. I've actually written a very long kind of zombie-like survival horror story. It was part of that masterclass I took, actually. It was Joyce Carol Oates. The challenge was write a story from different perspectives of different people. So I kind of chose this bunch of people, and I just enjoyed it so much. I wrote like 400 pages. So I really love the zombie genre.
Well, let's maybe do 10 more minutes. I got to get going. You probably do too. So let's try and get through these questions somewhat quick. I like this one. James Monroe says, ask her if she's discerning marriage, asking for a friend. Come on, that's nice. I don't know if you want to answer that.
James, I'm not dating anyone right now, so...
If you want to get in touch with me, you'll find a way. We're not going to tell you here, you creepy person. You could be psycho. All right, next question. Is Emma Catholic?
Yes, I like Jesus, and I believe he established the Catholic Church. And although I don't love everything about our church, I think it does a lot of things poorly. I think it's the one true church, and I like Jesus.
Very good.
I love him.
Amen. Last question. Matt and Emma, do you think there is any place or opportunity for Catholic Christians to evangelize through horror films, shows, or stories? I'll start. Absolutely. I think one of the nice things about the horror genre is it really can put you in touch with the supernatural and the uncanny in a way that other genres can't do as well, and to kind of put people in touch with the world as a place of mystery where there are forces of good and forces of evil at play, I think is something really important, and this can really put us into that zone and kind of evangelize us about, the kind of mysterious world in which we find ourselves, and just to repeat myself, the good and evil that's at play within it.
Agree. I think it was Lewis or Kreeft who said, probably Kreeft, quoting Lewis, who said, no one ever does something evil for the sake of doing something evil. Like people who do evil things, it's because they have a good in mind. Like you rob a bank because you want the money to feel safe or secure. If you hurt someone when you're angry, you're trying to feel like relief or something. And I think when you confront horror so much in the face, for me, I come to realize like there just has to be good. Like there just has to be good in the world. It feels like it should be that way. And it just goes to prove how much, well, there's a reason I feel that way. It's because we have a good God who has the victory. And yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, Emma, thanks very much. Any concluding thoughts before we wrap up?
Look, I'm always after some new horror fiction and films to read and watch, so I would love anyone's. Maybe you can. How do you do that? If you comment now, will I be able to see it once the video ends?
Yeah, I just let people know, not in the live chat, but below, for those of you who are watching in the comments section, let us know your favorite horror movie or horror story and tell us why. We'd love to learn from you, and we'd love to kind of share some of our ideas as well.
For sure.
All right. God bless, Emma. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Bye, Matt.
Bye.